co-founders of the Freedom Real Estate Group family of companies.
And this is podcast number
Cinco. You know how I know that? Cinco de Mayo.
Just happened.
Just happened. This is number 5.
And our podcast is Real Talk, which is real talk for real estate investors. And as you can see, we're on location. Where are we?
We are in Washington, D.C. This is both of our first time here. And I think we're both excited for the trip and for the little vacation that we said, hey, you know what? Let's record our podcast while we're there. And we didn't bring clothes. We didn't bring the cameras being held up by our suitcase because we didn't bring a tripod.
And our sunglasses.
And sunglasses. It's done very well.
Way to go, babe.
Yeah. And then the hairdryer didn't work.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, hairdryer didn't work, so you get me in a ball cap because my hair is still wet. So we're just figuring it out as we go, and ultimately we're going to try and do it somewhere outside, in a cool like destination type setting. But because we didn't have the tripod, we're like, we can't do that. We've got a courtyard down here. It's really, really cute, but we didn't have a tripod. We didn't want to lug our. So this is where you get us. And these seats, I was joking about the fact that I sat down and I tried to put my feet on the ground. If you're a short person like me, sometimes you have such deep seats you can't put your feet on the ground unless you sit at the very, very top. But then I couldn't keep my laptop on here because, of course, we don't have a printer, so we couldn't print out our notes. So we're just doing what we need to in order to get it all done. And so I'm just sitting all cross-legged like this, just so I can sit back and have my laptop here so that we can actually host a podcast.
That's right. But nonetheless, we're going through with it.
That's right. So podcast number 5, what we're talking about today is single family versus multifamily. And I know I get on the phone a lot with turnkey real estate investors, or just real estate investors in general, asking which one's better. Even our private lenders ask us, what's the difference between lending on a single family or lending on a multifamily? A lot of times my conversation with them is comps. My lending, it's going to be harder for me to find good quality comps for a multifamily, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. But that's what we're talking about today. We're just actually going to do kind of a lengthy discussion. I think you and Mark did a video about this, right? A vlog video?
Yep, just a vlog. Yep.
I was
a couple minutes.
Trying to watch it this morning when I woke up, and the internet wouldn't let it play. So I'm sure you guys did a rocking job.
Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome.
All right, so I've listed up pros and cons. You've got it on your iPad too,
yep.
Right? Okay. So let's start with single family, and we're going to talk about the pros of single family. So the first one I have on here is better neighborhoods, making the units easier to rent. So do you want to talk about the areas that we invest in that are single family residents?
Yeah, so typically in the Dayton area alone, there are some areas. One of the areas that we love to get properties on is called Belmont. We actually call that Bell Money. But I love the area because it's a working class area. It's a it's not A class or even B class, but it's a sort of a mixture of B minus to C plus properties. There's lots of great, even though they're not homeowners, they still take great pride in their properties. The tenants take great pride in their properties. The neighborhoods look great. The schools aren't the best in town, but they're not the worst in town either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real safe area. But I always tell people, if they ever get a property in that neighborhood, call me. I'll buy it without even looking at it most often, because I will, because It's just such a great area. There's always a high demand for rental properties there. There's always people looking for places to live in that area. So that's a great area. We can buy and sell in that area all day long.
Kettering is really the same way, right?
Kettering's just right on. It's actually that area is right on the border of Kettering. Kettering, now you're getting into much better schools, so that area is even higher sought after than Belmont.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an even better area. Again, it's hard to get properties there because they don't last long.
Yeah.
But that's another great area to get, and so not only does it make it easier to rent, but also it makes it easier if you want to sell your property. It makes it very easy to sell the property.
Yeah. So he actually hit on quite a few, just in that description, he hit on quite a few of the bullet points in the pros. So let's keep on going. So better neighborhoods, making the units properties I use the word units because we're comparing. So when you talk about properties, you think in terms of doors, right? If you have a single family property, that's one door. So maybe we'll just keep using the word doors so that you guys can understand. As we're talking about it, you'll really get it when we get to the multifamily area.
Right.
So making your doors, or door in this case because it's single family, easier to rent, better neighborhoods. Okay, so the second bullet point was attracts a higher quality tenant who takes better care of the property. I think this goes right to what you just said, right?
Exactly, because if there's some areas that we tend to not buy in because the tenants don't care about their property, they don't care about the neighborhood, and you see that driving down the street. And so the areas that we buy in more often is the areas where you can see it's as if they're all homeowners because they take great pride in their lawns, the flowers out of the front yard or on the front porch, or even their Christmas decorations. So that you can see that they take great pride in the area, and they really love. And it's long-term tenants too, because they'll want to stay there for a long time.
Yeah, you stole another one right there. Boom. All right. Number 3. These properties appreciate more over time. You want to touch on that one? I know we don't talk about appreciation. Ever, because we tell you do not buy for appreciation. Dayton is what? Boring.
Yes.
We're buying here for cash flow, and that's how you should go into any property like this. I've heard many times people say that those who bought for cash flow and went through 2008 and that market crash, they still won in the end because they were there for cash flow, not for appreciation, not to time the sale of their property, or they're still getting rents, and they were a-okay through that entire crash. But it was people who were speculative, or unfortunately perhaps getting ready to exit the property right when that happened, and they couldn't. They lost a lot of equity. Fortunately, if they were landlords, then they were able to just continue keeping the cash flow going. But we don't talk about appreciation a lot. But in single family, this is one of those instances where properties are going to appreciate over time. Historically, that's even true in Dayton. We just tell you not to count on it. It's the cherry on top.
That's right.
All right. The next one is better school districts. You started talking about better school districts. Is there any other areas you would say besides Kettering that we invest in that have really good schools?
Franklin has very good schools. It's harder to get properties there. Same with Miamisburg. It's because people are searching for those. When a property becomes available, we had a property that we were doing a retail flip on, and we didn't even have to put it on the MLS because people drove by, saw we were doing work on it, bought it before we even put it on the MLS.
Yep. Because
people are demanding that area because of the school districts. So those areas that have the best schools. It's so hard to find properties there because of that. Because people are going there just for their kids' sake. To get their kids into the better schools.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Tenants stay longer.
I touched on that earlier as
You
well.
did.
Sorry, I didn't even. I could have hit all these actually. But yeah, it's when you get that pride of it looks like pride of ownership, and the tenants they want to stay there, they want to live there, they want to they don't want to have to move and try to find another place, and so they've got a great area. It's usually in a great location of town, and so they will stay longer, and that's great for the investor.
Yes, less vacancy, less turn costs. Couldn't agree more. Tenants handle lawn care and snow removal. This one got added because people don't think about this. But if we're going to compare it to multifamily, start thinking about this because it does matter. So I will say this on a big so we've got 60 doors in Dayton. We've got other doors across the United States that are single family, but everything we've bought in Dayton has been multifamily, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as we get closer to the last half of the podcast where we're talking about that. But with a duplex, triplex, fourplex, you can pay one of the tenants to go ahead and take care of, reduce their rent or do something. Just pay them to go ahead and do it. That is very, very common. On our 56-unit apartment complex, that's not as common. Could we? We could, but they're just not as reliable for whatever reason once you get into those bigger complexes. So it's something you need to think about, that it turns into a pro for your single-family residents, because if your tenant is in a single-family property, they pride of not even ownership. They're just the tenant, and they love the house, and they're going to take care of the lawn and stuff for you.
Right. Yeah, typically with the single family, it's in the lease that they have to take care of the lawn and do the snow removal. But like you said, the 56 unit, that driveway and the parking lot is so huge.
Yeah.
That's not one person to do that. So that's when you have to hire a company to come in with the trucks and do all that stuff. And that's just the snow removal. But yeah, it's again, it goes back to it's a pride of ownership, but they're tenants, they're acting as if they own it.
Yeah.
But they want to have the best yard in the street, so it's a definite perk.
Yeah, for sure. The next one is something I probably hit on the most when I'm on the phone is exit strategy. Exit strategy matters whenever you are going to sell. Who are you selling to? If you have a single family property, you're selling to the world. It could be another landlord. It also could be an owner occupant. In a market like we're in right now, where things are just selling within 24 hours of property hitting the market, and it's just crazy. Having single family property is just, it's crazy. But I will say we just had an auction happen in the Dayton area for multifamily properties. They're large multifamily, and they went, like all of us investors who invest out here were like, no way would we pay that much for those properties. But the market's just kind of crazy. But the buyers for those properties in particular are smaller. You've got fewer people that you're selling to if you've got a multifamily.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The more doors you add, the smaller your buyer pool.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. You can sell underperforming properties and keep the good ones. I really like this particular point, meaning that if you have 10 doors and 2 of them aren't performing as much as you'd like, if that was a 10 unit, you got to sell the whole thing. It doesn't even matter. And that's actual market risk. That's in the con section of multifamily. If you have 10 single family properties and you've got 2 underperforming, just sell those 2. And now you have 8 performing. So you get to, cherry pick and sell whatever you want freely because they're separate buildings. So that's one of the pros. I thought that not a lot of people actually talk about. Another one was pest control is better maintained. I'll let you have this one.
Yeah, so with a single family house, you go in and you treat the single family house, and it either kills the pests or the pests go out, and they go back out into the yard or back down the street or whatever. The interesting thing with multi-units, when you go into one unit to do the pest control, well, they go to the other
next
units.
Unit.
Yeah, and so it's a maze. You start with one unit, and then you got to go not only just to the next unit, but you got to go to both units on each side of it, up and below, above and below. And so you're not getting the pests out. You're just moving the pests from one unit to the other. So it becomes, I guess you would call it a headache.
Yes. And we have personal experience in this 56 unit.
Yeah.
Have had bed bugs, cockroaches, it just everything. Like there was just some nasty peoples, and I'm just like, why do you live in this? Well, all that happened was, they trying to post to all the tenants and say, this is a compliance thing. If you don't let us in to do pest control, it's going to be a violation of your lease, which we wanted to get everybody out by that point anyway. Right. So it was another excuse to get them out, honestly. But all that happened was just kept on moving, unit to unit to unit. And so most of our units eventually, I think we have 10 evictions left.
Yeah.
So they're mostly vacant. And they've had multiple treatments just to kill all these bugs. It's been a treat. So single family, pro.
Yes, definite pro.
All right, next one is lower interest rates and lower down payments. So the ability to get a mortgage on a property, single family property, it's usually 20% down. And it depends on what the interest rates are at, at that point in time, but it's going to be lower interest rate that you'll receive than you would if you were buying multifamily property. And let's make a definition here. So multifamily is anything that is more than 1 door. So you got single family, 1 door only. A duplex is 2 doors, so that's multifamily. 2 to 4 doors is still residential, right? 5+ doors is commercial. So there's a difference in the types of loans that you have to get if you have 5+ doors in one building, or 2 to 4 doors, that's multifamily. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this. It really does relate across the board, except for probably this bullet point here, in that you can still get a residential loan for a 2, 3, or 4 door property.
Right.
All right. And then the last one for pros, market risk. You can spread out your single family rental properties, meaning you can buy some in Dayton, you can buy some in Cincinnati, you can buy some in Columbus, Memphis, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, wherever it is. You don't have exposure of buying in only one area, and where something happens to that area and all of your properties were in one place, which is typically what happens with multifamily. Right. You can also buy multifamily in different states and things like that, but we're trying to a little bit compare apples to apples, 10 doors to 10 doors maybe. If you've got a 10 unit building, then it's just, there's your 10 doors all in one place. if the steel plant goes down, all the people who are working in that area maybe no longer need a place to rent, and you just lost. But if you had 10 doors in many different areas, you've mitigated your risk of exposure.
Yep.
Because they're not in one spot. Anything to add there?
No, you nailed it.
Okay. All right. So some of the cons. This is interesting, and I put this con. I couldn't figure out where to put this one. It's comps determine value.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about how do you decide on the value of a single family or 2 to 4 unit building that falls in the residential category?
Right. So the industry standard is you want to find something that's 20% above and below the square footage. So if it's a 1,000 square foot house, we'll just do a single family for now. So I'm looking for any house within within that neighborhood, that subdivision, or up to a quarter mile or a half mile, depending on how far we need to go. That's for the 1,000 square foot, 800 square feet to a 1,200 square foot house, something that's in that square footage. Then you want to start to compare, like you said, apples to apples. So if it's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, we want to find other 3-bedroom, 1 baths, and then try to find houses that are comparable and that have sold within the last, first they try 90 days and then they'll go back 6 months. So we want to find something, properties that have sold that's comparable to the subject property to determine its value. Now, the second you get to duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, you just got harder and hardest to find comparables that sold in 90 days, that sold within a quarter mile, that sold, that have the same beds and baths.
To the rehab quality that we do.
Exactly, especially to that too. And so finding comps for a single family property in some areas is very easy. In some areas of town, all of the houses in that area are all the same. They're all 1,040 square feet. They're all 3-bedroom, one and a half. Yes, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. I love finding comps there because I can throw a rock and find a comparable property. It's easy, but there's some areas where you're trying to find a single family house and another house that's sold similar to it, and you can't find anything for like half a mile, or nothing is sold in the last 6 months. And so it makes it harder, but boy, the second you go to duplexes and triplexes, and especially triplexes, because those are few and far between. Yeah. And then fourplexes in Middletown, there's like 3 of them. And so trying to find 3 comparable solds is very difficult, and so it just makes it harder and hardest to find comparable properties to determine its value.
I like that, harder and harder.
Yeah, it's the truth.
Okay, so comps determine value. So there has to be comps there to say how much your property is worth. So you could have the nicest property on the street. You could have the largest property on the street. It could literally, price per square foot, be worth a lot more than other properties, but you're never going to get that high dollar top square foot based on putting in the highest finishes or having the biggest house on the block. They actually tell you not to buy the biggest house on the block, and you likely shouldn't, spend a ton on your rehab. We do very good rehabs, high quality rehabs, but it's not granite. It's not like high-end finishes where we're wasting money. We're just putting good quality, strong materials in for a tenant. To use so that there's not a lot of damage. That's why I put it in the con, because other properties are going to tell you what your house is worth, even if you do a better job or have a bigger property than others on the street.
Yeah, in fact, we had a property that it was the biggest house in the neighborhood. And so when we ran the comps on the property, we stayed within that quarter mile. We stayed within the last 90 days. But when the appraiser came out to do the appraisal came in $20,000 less because the appraiser would not leave the subdivision. Even though our house was the biggest in the area, then the other comps were within a quarter mile, but it was outside of that subdivision by a block. He still wouldn't use those comps to compare a property and would not budge on his price above that so we lost $20,000 because it was the largest house in the neighborhood. So not only don't you buy the largest house in the neighborhood for yourself, don't buy it as an investment either.
Good story. Applies well here. All right, you hit it home. Okay, vacancies, and here's a con for single family vacancies. How long will it take to turn and rent again while you get goose egg? You're getting nothing, and you're still having to pay for the repairs and the turn itself. The mortgage, taxes and insurance, maintenance, utilities, all those things you're still on the hook for, while if you have one door, is empty. And for how long? Is that 1 month? Is that 2 months? Is it 4 months? You know? So we've got a property right now that was actually vandalized. Fortunately, the owner had renter's insurance, or some type of insurance, so that he's getting paid rent while they're trying to do a claim, I think, against the tenant. I don't even remember the whole story. I just briefly heard something, and I was like, why has that been vacant? And I freaked out as soon as I saw the date. And they're like, no, it's fine. The owner's actually getting rent because he had insurance to cover something like this. And I was like, whew, okay. My heart, like, I just had to slow down. It's like, we don't do that. Anyway, so when you have one door or two doors, you know, it's really, really tough to have vacancies. Whereas multifamily, you mitigate that by economies of scale. So that's a big, big one that's probably talked about the most, I would say, is 100% vacancy, and that being a financial tough time for a landlord of paying his bills while no money's coming in, his or her bills. All right, the next con is buying 4 single family to match 1 fourplex is typically more expensive and lower cash flow. So what are the price ranges for, just give me an average price for a single family property.
Single family property, average price around 94, 95,000.
Okay. Give me a price of one of the fourplexes that we have.
149.
Okay. So he just told you close to 100. So by 4 single family properties, where you're at 400,000, he just told you a fourplex, 149.
149.
And the cash flow, what's the difference in cap rates versus you've got that 1% rule, right? Really on the single family. But what does it look like for the fourplex?
So the fourplex, I think it was 149, but I think the rents were like $1,600 or $1,700 a month, so it was close to like a 12 cap.
Yeah.
But the single family house, you know, $99,000 or $95,000, it's going to be renting for $950 to $1,000.
Yeah.
So you're looking at right around an 8 cap on those.
Yeah. So big deal, right? It costs you a lot more money to get 4 doors in the single family world, and you know, pretty good. I mean, 1% cash flow. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's good. Yeah. That's what all of us kind of make judgments upon, is that 1% cash flow. Some of us cash on cash, some of us cap rate. Everybody kind of looks at deals a little bit differently. But that fourplex for 149. What does Randy say? Holla!
Yeah.
So that was another con in single families. That's much more expensive, and you get lower cash flow. The next con, buying 4 single family, is 4 sellers, 4 inspections, 4 loans, etc. And I'm going to add to this 4 roofs, because we're going to talk about that. And multifamily. So every single house is its own house and its own negotiation and its own cost center. So again, the multifamily, it was 4 doors, same thing. 1 seller, 1 inspection, 1 loan, 1 roof. So that's a good one. And then the loans. So the last thing on single family cons is that a single person, so let's just say Flip can get 10 mortgages. That's it. That's where he's capped. He can only buy 10 single family houses. After that, you have to get a portfolio loan in order to go to 11 and on. We are married, so if you're single, you 10. 10's your limit. If you're married and you don't buy them jointly, Flip buys his 10, I can buy my 10 together, now we have 20. So, but then, that's it. You're maxed now, and you have to go to portfolio loan in order to buy more. Whereas, commercial loans, 5+ doors in one building, now you can get as many of those as you want, and the value is totally, we're about to talk about how to determine value on a multifamily property that is 5 doors plus. So that is a con, is the amount of loans that you can get for single family before having to go to a portfolio loan.
I agree, 100%.
All right, you ready to go to multifamily?
Woo!
I'm ready to go start exploring Washington, D.C. Let's get this. All right, multifamily, we're going to start with the pros. So we just referenced it. How to determine value on a multifamily property. And when I say multifamily this time, we're talking 5+, because residential, as we said before, is comps, right?
Wonderful.
Residential comps, you have to look at the area and what they're selling at. For 5+ doors, you're looking at the net operating income. That's how you determine value. That's how loans are based off of, is that net operating income. So your goal as an investor is all those value adds that increase your net operating income. So on our 56 unit, there's a few things that I wrote down about how we're increasing the income. We're adding a utility package, and on that utility package, we're getting a $50 a month premium per door. That's a lot of money when you add up 56 times 50, and I can't do it in my head, so I'm not gonna.
That's a lot of cheddar.
It's a lot of cheddar every single month through that utility package. Adding Wi-Fi, we're charging $30 a month for Wi-Fi. That's and that utility package, by the way, is a discount to what the residents could get on their own. It would be more expensive for them to get the utilities on their own than for us to offer the package that we're offering. Yet we still get the $50 premium. I am going to be doing a video about that in the future with the person that introduced me to this concept,
Awesome.
so that we can share it with everybody. But that's a different podcast or vlog or whatever it turns into.
Yeah.
So we added the utility package, we added Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi packages is like $50 to $80, you know, through a Spectrum or something like that. We're doing it for $30 a month. They can get Wi-Fi. So that's $30 per door. We have laundry rooms. So that's not a big, that's not big. It's not something that we really are paying attention to. We're actually partnering with a company that was going to provide it and provide the washers and dryers, and they maintain it, and we split profits 50-50. We have to cover the utilities, they have to cover the maintenance and the actual units. So that's not really meant to be a whole lot, but it's going to be a little bit, and more than that, it's an amenity for the residents that are there, that they have laundry facilities and they don't have to go somewhere else.
Yep.
Right? So, and then just building out any type of amenities is always going to help you increase the value to either rent faster or rent higher. And anytime that you can add dollars to the bottom line, you are increasing the value of your property, essentially. So that is a pro, that you have a lot more control over the value of your property than you do when you're buying a single family or 2 to 4 units. Okay, economies of scale. Overall, the cost is better. You can't buy as many doors with the same capital. You can't buy as many doors with the same capital. I don't know what I wrote there, but I know what I'm referencing. Sometimes, this was early this morning, I had just woken up and I'm like, I need bullet points for our podcast. This is what we were talking about in terms of buying 4 single family versus a 4-plex, or 10 single families versus a 10-plex, or 10 doors in a building. The overall cost is better in terms of acquiring those 10 doors as opposed to doing 10 single family. So that's what I was meaning to say there. Okay, repairs and maintenance are less because it's all in one house, right? So if you fix the plumbing across the board, you just fix the plumbing for however many units are in that building all at once. The plumber is going to charge you less because everything is in one location. Your one roof, our 56, our 60 doors is actually 6 roofs. Yeah. So when we replace one roof, in fact, right after we bought, we replaced a roof on the 18-unit building and the 8-unit building. So that improved the property and value for 2 buildings. That 18 plus 8 is 26. 26 doors. Boom. 2 roofs. That was all it was. So repairs and maintenance, all of that's going to cost less. Replacing the roofs, that's such a big expense. Vacancies, they're offset with other occupied units. So you don't have 100% vacancy. Right. If Flip and I have 10 units out of the 60, like, that sucks. But we have 50 that are still paying rent. So we're covering our mortgage, our interest, taxes, common area, maintenance, everything. We're covering our bills because we still have all the other units. Certainly once you get to the point where you have 60 single family, you could say the same thing. It turned into the same reality for you. You won't have the same roofs, repairs, and maintenance cost because we combined all of our doors onto one central location, but you will have the same effect of other properties offsetting costs. So that does help, but the cost to get into 60 single family as opposed to 60 multifamily is a big difference. And so will your debt be a big difference. Let's see, generate positive cash flow quicker because you've got all of those doors. You can scale faster, meaning buying a 10-unit building is easier than the 1 seller, 1 inspection, 1 loan, 1 insurance policy. It's just one instead of 10.
It's easier closing. It's 1 closing.
Yeah.
Not 10.
Yes, everything's easier.
Yes.
With multifamily.
Yep.
So anything that I missed on pros before we go into the cons, because a lot of this we talked about in single family, so now we're really kind of highlighting now. Remember what we talked about up here about cons? There are pros down here. Yeah,
it's putting everything in as far as your investments on hyperdrive.
Yeah.
When you have one property and you're getting $1,000 a month, that's one property, $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
Now, let's say we have 10 properties, 10 units, and that each unit is making $900 a month. Well, so now that's $9,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's just putting everything on hyperdrive and making your investments grow faster.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Love that. You're so smart, Flipper. All right.
I've had my coffee.
All right. Multifamily cons. Common areas to maintain. We said this is something a lot of people don't talk about. We have common areas in our apartment buildings that we have to, clean, and that's a cost center for us. So keeping that in mind. Lawn maintenance and snow removal. We talked about that up there. That's not something that we pay our tenants to do. It's something we pay to have done. So that's another cost center for us. Pest control. We gave you the story already. It's been a nightmare. I am so glad we are doing a turn.
Yeah.
And trying to get everybody out anyway, just to clean that place up, because it certainly helped us. But even as people were vacating, there was still like another unit's got bugs, another unit's got bugs. And it's just because they kept traveling and traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine the occupied? Like, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we've got these, we bought these. Do you remember what they are? They're like discs that we put like in every single unit. And as long as you change them out every 90 days, they should keep away all bugs.
Right.
And they don't stink, they don't do anything. So as we're filling units, that's one of the things. You know how you do biannual inspections of properties and you check the furnace filters and make sure that they're being changed, because tenants usually aren't changing them.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we want to keep on doing, but doing it on a quarterly basis to change out those bugs, because it's such a horrible thing to have bugs in a multifamily property that to mitigate it is the wisest move.
Yep.
Up front. One geographical location putting you at risk if something happens. We talked about this.
Right. Yeah. Because now you don't have the 10 houses all over town or towns.
Mm-hmm.
You just have one location.
Yeah.
And if something happens with that city, with its economy or just whatever, all of a sudden, boom, vacancies.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yes. Yeah. That's tough. Exit strategy. Smaller pool buyers. You talked about this.
Yeah, exactly. Again, the more doors you add to a unit or to a complex, the smaller your buyer pool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talked about the auction recently. There was a unit on there. It was a 42 unit. Now it was an auction, so I knew that there were going to be more buyers at that auction. But that's it. Those were the buyers. Mm-hmm. And there were probably maybe a handful of buyers for that, and they were all bidding on it until it went beyond making sense. But yeah, smaller buyer pool compared to a single family property completely.
Yeah. And the last one we have is higher interest rates, higher down payment. So we talked about that a little bit. You're going to have to put more down for a commercial loan, and your interest rate's going to be higher than a residential loan. Yeah. So that's one of the cons. But as we kind of wind this up, because that's our pro-con list, I'm going to ask you first, between the single family and multifamily, I really believe it's goals. It's personality.
Yeah.
How much risk do you want to take, and in what areas do you want to take? Because they both have risks. Mm-hmm. Certainly, as an investor, we all know that we are buying a property to build wealth. Legacy sometimes, pass on to the kids sometimes. But there's risk in investing. That's just a part of the game. So it's determining which risk that you're okay with. So single family or multifamily?
Well, multifamily all day long.
Yeah, and why?
Just because, like I said earlier, it hyperdrives your investing. If we want to do 10 properties and they're all single family properties, like I said, we're going to get the $1,000 a month per property. But if we do the 56 unit and then an 8 unit somewhere else and then a 20 unit somewhere else, that's just hyperdriving our investments. It's bringing more money back in.
Yep.
And then especially with creative financing, creative solutions on how to do this.
Yes.
And OPM, other people's money.
That's right.
So it's
that's another podcast, baby.
Yeah. Sorry, no, I don't mean to get ahead of myself. Multifamily all day long.
Yeah, I'm with Flip. Multifamily all day long for all the reasons he just said it. And some of the cons that we talked about in multifamily, even though we one geographical location that he just mentioned, we can mitigate that. We've used that word too much in this podcast already, but it's appropriate by buying something in a different location. We don't have to buy all of these apartments in our backyard. It can be somewhere else, so that we are taking the risk away. Even though this is part of the risk.
Yep.
In multifamily investment.
And by all means, this is That's what I feel.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone needs to go and buy multifamily. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying at all. You need to be comfortable in whatever you do.
Yes.
And this is what I want to do, and this is something that I'm comfortable in doing, and something that I want to continue to do more of.
Yep. Yeah, you got to make your own choice based on the risk you're okay with and the goals that you have. I know a lot of people that single family, hands down, they're like, I want single family.
Yep.
I'll buy 10 of those, and I don't want 10 doors. For all the pros that we listed there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to you to decide. We just gave you all the pros and cons.
That's
so
right.
We're going to wind down. Yeah,
Yep.
Is there anything else that we're going to touch on?
No, I don't believe so. But again, we hope that you enjoyed this podcast of the pros and cons of single family to multifamily. We're in Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter where we're at. We're constantly seeing more real estate, constantly getting leads. I got a lead. There's a house right down the street. I can't remember how many doors, it's a lot, like 50 bedrooms or something like that. I think there's a tenant, he just signed a 4-year lease just recently. But I think they want
Took me a second.
I think they want owner financing for it. But anyway, we're always talking about real estate, no matter where we go. And the architecture here is absolutely amazing.
It is.
But we hope you enjoyed this podcast.
This is Real Talk, which is Real Talk with Real Estate Investors. This was podcast number 5.
Cinco.
And we like to end it with invest smart.
Live happy.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.